Hello there, and welcome back to War Thunder. Today I want to talk about the STRV, the Swedish Premium 7.3 medium tank, and this tank is very unique and it is showing some new techniques in War Thunder in terms of game mechanics, and I want to talk about this. This is a little bit of a warning video. This is a first impressions. This is not a complete review, although I will go through the overall statistics a little bit just to give you a bit of a nice picture. The tank has problems with its hull aiming, which is necessary because the gun is completely fixed, and I thought that Gaijin would have fine-tuned it by now, because before this tank got introduced in the game, we saw the introduction of the German VT-12 that also relies on hull aiming, although the vertical aiming is still done by the gun drive, so it still can correct this. So it was not really smooth, it was more rough before we saw the introduction of this tank, but with this tank it actually got rougher because of the vertical component of the aiming, and as you can see it wobbles all over the place, and this is absolutely killing me quite literally in many games. You have those safe shots which are no problem with any other tank, but then you have to wobble around like this. Yeah, and so you whiff shots all over the place. But it's not just this wobbling that you can observe now in 4 different gameplays, which are there to highlight the problems. I also have good gameplay, but the good gameplay is very situational, and very often it is, well, preying on the mistakes of the enemy rather than showing your own initiative. So you have by default to be in the right spot at the right time. Let's begin to talk about the armor, let's talk about the interior, let's talk about the firepower, and at the end the mobility, and then all comes together. So we have overall a very well angled frontal plate for both the upper and front and lower glazes, sorry about this, with 40 millimeters, angled at 78 and 73 degrees for the upper and the lower glazes respectively. The side plating and the rear plating is 30 millimeter, and it's a rather low silhouette for a tank, I give it that, so that's the advantage of this design. Again, I'm not ranting here about the design, I'm ranting about here how Gaijin introduced this in the game, how badly it is made. Then the top is a mere 20 and 8 millimeters, so it's an easy target for cannon cast planes. And that is the armor. Then the X-ray reveals a little bit of a survivability buff for the crew, much like the Merkava. So you have behind the first heel tank some transmission and the engine, some spaced armor of 30 millimeters, and then 3 crew members. And then we come to another thing that annoys me a little bit, because Gaijin has decided that this is the only tank in the game that is fully operational with only 1 crew member left alive. And so out of the 3, 2 can be killed, and then you're still operational. So Gaijin is selling you at this very moment a game mechanic advantage that is unique, next to the hull aiming, which doesn't really work properly. As you just saw here, even on this flat terrain, even at long distance where you might say, oh, this tank is you know, it works. Yeah, it has some difficulties. So that's the armor, that's the interior. Let's talk about the mobility. Well, the mobility, we have 14.3 horsepower per tons from a engine producing 540 horsepower, propelling the 37.7 ton tank to a top speed of 50 kilometers per hour forwards and still 44 in reverse. The tank has obviously neutral steering. It has also overall a nice interesting problem with the suspension. So you can see when you use this hull aiming, you also have to hull aim up and down, and so the suspension is not level anymore, and that means that you have to really make sure that if you go from the hull aiming mode to the travel mode, that you're not driving like a cheese wedge. So you have to level the tank out so that the suspension has the same distance from min to max on the hull, on the front and the rear, because otherwise, believe it or not, out of all the things, you come across the gear shifting bug. Yeah, and you're very slow then anyway, so the horsepower to ton ratio is not the greatest, but you are crawling most of the time with below 30 kilometers per hour, and that's really not all that great, right? So the thing is that when you don't have here the suspension perfectly leveled out, then you come across the gear shifting bug, which means, what is the gear shifting bug even? Well, this is what I call the phenomenon when a quick tank goes downhill and then the driver goes fully nuts and shifts up and down so quickly that the tank stops accelerating despite the transmission being able to do so. Oh, watch how I deal with this Conqueror, because it just shows the issues with the hull aiming even more extreme. I just can't get the hull aligned with the enemy tank properly. I can't really aim at the enemy crew and the enemy ammo as much as I would like to. So when you then have this slow tank and it has this gear shifting bug, it's also even more annoying. And it's the funny thing, because it's even there than on flat terrain even. It's absolutely crazy. So the tank very often is extremely sluggish and just doesn't want to accelerate at all, and just is dealing with so many issues. Now let's talk about the firepower, because this is one hell of a gun. It is the 105 L74 cannon with 50 rounds, and it is equipped with an autoloader. And independent from the crew skills, you have a 4-second reload. Even with one crew member, 4-second reload. And what kind of ammunition do we have? Well, it is very interesting, because we have also on this tank, very uniquely, two types of ammunition that are essentially the same. We have essentially the APDS from the Leopard 1, but also from the M60. So if you look at the stock SLPPRJ M61 APDS, 1500 meters per second muzzle velocity, 303 millimeters of penetration at 0 degrees angles of attack, and at 60 degrees angles of attack 116 millimeters. But you also can use the SLPPRJ M62 APDS with 260 millimeters of penetration at 0 degrees angles of attack, and at 60 degrees angles of attack 144 millimeters. So this is better, and also the muzzle velocity with 1450 meters per second is not all that different. Then we have a high explosive shell with 23 millimeters of penetration, but only 680 meters per second muzzle velocity, and also a smoke shell, which is nice, and sadly its only source of smoke, so there is no ES, and there is no smoke launchers, there is only the smoke shell. The tank has no hash round, no APHE round, and no heat round. So you effectively only have to go at the enemy with APDS. So the firepower is great. The armor is trollish due to its angle, but unreliable. Then we have the mobility that really has to deal also with the hull aiming. And then when you actually want to aim, the tank goes all over the place and you can't simply get the gun on target. And even if, it just takes way too long. And this is where then we come to the funny part about the gun handling statistics. So we have 10 degrees of hull aiming depression, only 12 degrees of gun hull elevation, and then this is really funny. The elevation speed is 5 degrees per second, but the tank's rotation speed is 60 degrees per second. So the tank just spins around like the turret of an SPA at higher tiers. So it gains so much momentum that if you do not just break it down, the tank just literally overshoots its target, and then, you know, is oscillating into the target, which also takes so much time. It's crazy. You probably have seen it in the gameplay 1 or 2 times, if not even more. This is something that is absolutely wrong and crazy and shouldn't be the case. But that's just me. So the thing about this tank is it to be recommended? Well, the usual thing is there is currently nothing to research within the Swedish tech tree. It is just simply not working, and it is also, well, at the end of the day, it's a good premium. When you look at the civil line modifiers, when you look at the RP modifiers, when you look at the actual income, it is really good. But it's too good for my taste, and I think that Gaijin is baiting a lot of people into buying it, which is an expensive premium. The package costs like, what, $50? 50 euros? This is an expensive tank that very often doesn't work, is deeply frustrating, and is not to be recommended. The firepower is nice. It is unique in its abilities, but again, it's about how Gaijin implemented this. And look at how long it takes for me to align the shot with this guy to then kill him. So, do I recommend it? Not yet. Not yet. And I'm sorry that I couldn't get the video out there earlier. But this is how it is. The tank is fundamentally flawed. It is extremely frustrating. You very often die by it. And it just doesn't really fit the meta of War Thunder. Sure, if you're an extreme camper and you have the perfect spot where this hull aiming works without driving the tank backwards, because that's another thing. By trying to align the tank with a target on a slope, the tank drives backwards all the time. Which is another indication of the inherent problem of the driving model in War Thunder being unfinished for years. So that's enough for me. That's literally enough for me. The tank is broken in more than one ways. It was very exhausting. It was just absolutely stupid to play this tank, and no. It could be a fun tank, it could be cool, but it just doesn't work. And this is one of the results. You can see the crazy income for only 2 kills, and that is what we have with this tank. A tank that is too good to be true in one situation, but most of the time it is absolutely outrageously bad, frustrating, and just in the long run tiring. It is not fun that it doesn't work. And that's it for me today. So thanks for watching, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the video nevertheless. Please give it a like if you did, subscribe if you want to see more, and we'll see each other on the waves, in the skies, and on the battlefields of War Thunder.